When we first start drawing, or when children draw, there's a tendency to create orderly shapes. Our instincts tend to favor balance and order. Of course, we quickly notice that some artists create incredibly dynamic images, and we start wanting to arrange objects in more interesting ways. This is part of developing a new instinct as an artist. We intentionally break away from balanced arrangements. For example, adding shadows can make a composition much more appealing. This is due to the rhythm created by contrast between light and shadow, and the division of shapes. In this video, we will discuss why does rhythm occur. We'll look at common methods for creating rhythm and how to express the desired visual effect. Why does rhythm occur? Because of differences. When one person stands apart from a group, we notice him more easily. If we want to convey that this person is lonely, placing him within the crowd won't achieve that effect. The rhythm is created because of the difference. How we express this difference depends on what we want to convey in the image. Differences create contrast, and the stronger the contrast, the more it draws the viewer's attention. This square stands out clearly against a white background. But if you place these squares next to it, the original square becomes less noticeable. When designing a composition, we're essentially playing a game of arranging visual forces. In this painting, the contrast is quite weak. The color tones are too uniform. The eyes are blue. And even though the contrast isn't strong, they still become a focal point. Then there's the skirt, which, due to the brush strokes, creates a textural contrast and becomes an interesting detail. The fabric in the background is too even. If I use shadows to break it up, it would be more engaging. We see similar concepts in many design books or courses, but the diagrams they use for explanation often look like this. But in reality, it's like this, sometimes even in different colors. This kind of noise makes the composition more lively. This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Learning new art skills is crucial when you want to grow as an artist, like learning new techniques and fundamentals. But how? Thankfully, we have Skillshare for that. Skillshare is an online learning community that offers thousands of classes on a wide range of topics. These classes are designed to help individuals learn new skills, improve their existing skills, and connect with like-minded people. Skillshare offers thousands of classes taught by industry professionals in fields such as film, illustration, design, freelancing, productivity, and more. For an artist, the most important thing is to approach their work with authenticity. This authenticity is what ultimately defines your style. This fun and inspiring class lays out 5 hands-on exercises that will unlock your artistic identity. Working in your medium of choice, you'll explore who you are and what you have to say. So I highly recommend checking it out. Join Skillshare right now, and for the first 500 people to use my link, we'll get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Big thanks to Skillshare. Now back to the video. Let's clarify the common types of contrast. Shapes, or rather, shape segmentation. Here's a practice piece I worked on earlier. You'll notice that this part doesn't look quite right. That's because there's no contrast here, just one large dark area. Once I break up this dark area, it looks much better. The segmented shapes also have a contrast of large, medium, and small. This example might not be very clear. In this Chainsaw Man example, aside from the impact of the content, the arrangement is fairly orderly, but the background divides the composition. Let's look at character design instead. In games, the coolest or rarest characters often have more shape segmentation compared to regular characters. We rarely see sleeves without any added elements. For example, in this design, if there were no segmentation, it would look like this. If the segmentation were right in the middle, it would also be dull. Placing the segmentation in these areas creates contrast and makes it more interesting. This is also a contrast of large, medium, and small. These are some common ways clothing is segmented. They create rhythm through the way the segments are arranged. Spatial contrast. When arranging stones like this, it still feels like something is missing. If I increase the distance between them and make the objects in the foreground larger while making the background objects smaller, this creates a sense of depth. But it can also feel very rigid because the size change is too obvious. At this point, we can add some noise by introducing small objects with varying sizes. This not only creates size contrast, but also enhances the sense of space. Then, by dividing the composition with simple lines, it starts to look good. Quantity contrast. When doing sketches or painting from reality, we might encounter this situation. Repeating elements can look too monotonous. We all know that painting isn't about copying reality. In such cases, do we need to replicate exactly, or can we make it better? The solution is simple. You can change the positioning or even remove a tree altogether. Here's some good examples. However, even doesn't always mean bad. We instantly focus on his face because the people below and the head are very evenly arranged, with minimal differences. There's also a contrast between dense and sparse areas. When designing a composition, we should first determine what we want to express. These techniques are tools to help convey your message. This is even more evident in contrast with value and hue. Comparing these two paintings of mine, it's clear that the right one has much more vibrant colors. I placed the highest contrast orange on the lollipop to make the face the visual focal point. Honestly, adding a bit of orange to the eyes would be even better. I also added orange to the surrounding areas, but it's less intense than the lollipop, creating a sense of harmony and making the composition more lively. For example, in traditional drawing exercises, we draw an object and then add a background. There's a common technique used to highlight the object. Darken the background near the light side of the object, and lighten the background near the dark side of the object. Take these two photographs, for example, from the same photographer, but with different treatments of the same scene. The central block is very dark, and so is the figure. To make the figure stand out, these bright areas are essential. Without these bright areas, it would look like this. Now let's look at another image. The man's bright clothes contrast with the dark background, while the woman contrasts with the bright wall. Value contrast has a very interesting method, which we'll discuss more in the next section. So how to use these contrast? These are basic visual principles. My preference is for an animated style, and this type of painting is very similar to graphic design. The difference is that the animated style tends to have a bit more visual noise than graphic design. This painting of mine is currently the most effective using a graphic design approach. There isn't a real background, just a collection of various elements placed together. This type of painting doesn't require much consideration. We just need to arrange the elements in an appealing way. Most of the time, the arrangement of shapes follows basic logic. As long as the visual focuses on the face, it will look pretty good. One advantage of this method is that we don't need to have exceptional fundamental skills to create something decent. Chainsaw Man is a great example. During its serialization, likely due to the tight schedule, the drawings were particularly rough, but still very lively. Let's summarize some commonly used techniques. The quantity contrast between the main character and the group of people. The value contrast between the background and the characters. These are very effective and easy to implement approaches. There's an interesting way to understand value contrast. When we're working with grayscale, we usually think about how to create a sense of volume and detail. But we can approach it differently. I know I'm not great at fundamentals, but when I'm drawing, I can focus more on the rhythm of value contrast. For example, if the hair is black, the background near it should be a bit lighter. The face is bright, the surrounding area should be darker. However, not everything should follow this contrast strictly, as it can look too intentional. Some areas can have subtle transitions. This too is a form of contrast. This is the final painting, done in the style I prefer. Understanding it this way can free you somewhat from the constraints of fundamentals. While fundamentals are important, there are also tricks like this that allow you to express your ideas more freely. Lastly, I'd like to share my process for creating artwork with a focus on graphic design. Step 1. Define the theme. The theme is the most important part. Once we've defined the theme, we know what elements to include in the illustration. Step 2. Find element references. Step 3. Define the main structure and trend lines. Step 4. Draw poses that fit the impression. Then, during the process of adding elements, find ways to create contrast and introduce points of interest. For example, here's the hue contrast. I first painted the characters and background using cool tones, then added orange for contrast. The arrangement of elements includes quantity contrast and spatial contrast. I'm not a naturally gifted artist. I rely on both intuition and theory to analyze and create. Through this process, I'm building a new way of thinking. Hope this is helpful. Thanks for watching.